The shadows of Black Hollow. The disappearance. The town of Black Hollow was the kind of place where secrets festered like open wounds. Nestled deep in the woods, it was a forgotten relic of a bygone era, where the streets were lined with crumbling brick buildings and the air carried the faint scent of damp earth. The townsfolk were a peculiar bunch, tight-lipped and wary of outsiders. They had a way of looking at you as if they could see straight through to your darkest secrets. It was here, on a cold November evening, that 17-year-old Clara Whitaker vanished without a trace. Clara was the kind of girl who stood out in a place like Black Hollow. With her fiery red hair and piercing green eyes, she was a spark of life in an otherwise dreary town. She had dreams of leaving Black Hollow behind, of becoming a journalist and uncovering the truths that others tried to bury. But those dreams were cut short the night she disappeared. Her mother, Margaret Whitaker, reported her missing the next morning. Clara had gone out for a walk after dinner, something she often did to clear her head. When she didn't return by midnight, Margaret grew worried. By dawn, the entire town was searching for her. But Clara was nowhere to be found. The detective. 2 days after Clara's disappearance, Detective Jonas Kane arrived in Black Hollow. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His reputation preceded him. He was known for solving cases that others deemed impossible. But this case was different. There were no leads, no witnesses, no evidence. It was as if Clara had simply vanished into thin air. Kane's first stop was the Whitaker household. Margaret Whitaker was a frail woman with hollow eyes and a voice that trembled when she spoke. She led Kane to Clara's room, a small space filled with books, notebooks, and photographs. Kane's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. "Did Clara have any enemies?" Kane asked, his voice low and steady. Margaret shook her head. "No, everyone loved Clara. She was kind, smart, always helping others." Kane picked up a photograph from Clara's desk. It was a picture of her standing with a group of friends in front of the old mill on the outskirts of town. He recognized one of the faces, a boy named Ethan Cole, the son of the town's wealthiest family. "What about Ethan Cole?" Kane asked. "Were they close?" Margaret hesitated. "They used to be. But they had a falling out a few months ago. Clara never told me what happened." Kane made a mental note to speak with Ethan. He spent the rest of the day interviewing Clara's friends and teachers, but no one had seen or heard from her since the night she disappeared. As the sun set, Kane found himself standing in front of the old mill. It was a decaying structure, its wooden beams warped and splintered with age. The air around it was heavy, almost oppressive. Kane felt a chill run down his spine as he stepped inside. The interior was dark and damp, the floor littered with broken glass and debris. Kane's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing graffiti-covered walls and rusted machinery. He was about to leave when something caught his eye, a small, silver locket lying in the corner. Kane picked it up and opened it. Inside was a picture of the secret. The discovery of the locket sent shockwaves through Black Hollow. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, their suspicions growing with each passing day. Kane knew he was getting closer to the truth, but he also knew that the people of Black Hollow would do anything to protect their secrets. His next stop was the Cole mansion. The Coles were the most powerful family in Black Hollow, their wealth and influence stretching back generations. Ethan Cole was waiting for him on the front porch, his arms crossed and his expression guarded. "What do you want, detective?" Ethan asked, his voice cold. "I want to know what happened to Clara," Kane replied, his eyes narrowing. "And I think you know something." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." Kane held up the locket. "We found this in the old mill. Care to explain how it got there?" Ethan's eyes flickered with fear, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't know. Maybe she dropped it." Kane took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Listen, kid. I don't have time for games. If you know something, now's the time to tell me. Ethan hesitated, his eyes darting around as if he was afraid someone might be listening. Finally, he sighed and said, "Meet me at the mill tonight. Midnight. I'll tell you everything." The betrayal Cain arrived at the mill just before midnight. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. He found Ethan waiting inside, his face pale and drawn. "Start talking," Cain said, his hand resting on the hilt of his gun. Ethan took a deep breath. "Clara and we were seeing each other. But my father found out. He didn't approve. He said she wasn't good enough for our family." Cain's eyes narrowed. "What did he do?" Ethan looked away, his voice trembling. He threatened her. Told her to stay away from me or else. But Clara didn't listen. She said she wasn't afraid of him. Cain's mind raced. "Do you think your father had something to do with her disappearance?" Ethan nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I didn't want to believe it, but I think he did something to her. I think he killed her." Cain felt a surge of anger. "Where is he now?" "He's at the house," Ethan replied. "But you have to be careful. He's not the only one involved. There are others. People in this town who will do anything to protect their secrets." Cain nodded. "Stay here. I'll handle this." The confrontation. Cain stormed into the Cole mansion, his gun drawn. He found Ethan's father, Richard Cole, sitting in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The man looked up, his expression calm and unbothered. "Detective Cain," Richard said, his voice smooth. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Where's Clara?" Cain demanded, his finger hovering over the trigger. Richard smirked. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Cain stepped closer, his eyes blazing. "Your son told me everything. I know you threatened her. I know you had something to do with her disappearance." Richard's smirk faded, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. "You're meddling in things you don't understand, detective. This town. It's not what it seems. There are forces at work here that you can't comprehend." Cain's grip tightened on his gun. "I don't care about your secrets. I just want to find Clara." Richard leaned back in his chair, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "You're too late, detective. Clara's gone. And you'll never find her." The truth. Cain left the mansion, his mind reeling. He knew Richard was hiding something, but he needed proof. He returned to the mill, where Ethan was still waiting. "Did you find her?" Ethan asked, his voice desperate. Cain shook his head. "Your father's not talking. But I'm not giving up." Ethan hesitated, then said, "There's something else you should know. The mill. It's not just an old building. There's a basement. A secret room. My father and the others. They use it for meetings." Cain's eyes widened. "Show me." Ethan led him to a hidden door in the floor of the mill. They descended a narrow staircase into a dark, damp room. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something metallic. Cain's flashlight revealed the truth. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and in the center of the room was a stone altar. But what caught Cain's attention was the blood stains on the floor. "My God," Cain whispered. "What have they been doing down here?" Ethan's face was pale. "I don't know. But I think Clara found out. And I think they killed her to keep her quiet." Cain felt a surge of determination. "We need to get out of here. We need to bring this to the authorities." But as they turned to leave, they heard footsteps above them. The door to the basement slammed shut, and the sound of a lock clicking into place echoed through the room. Cain's heart sank. They were trapped. Chapter 7. The Escape. Cain and Ethan searched the room for another way out, but the walls were solid stone. The air grew thinner with each passing minute, and Cain knew they were running out of time. "There has to be another way," Ethan said, his voice panicked. Cain's eyes fell on the altar. He noticed a small, hidden compartment beneath it. He pried it open and found a set of keys. "These might be our ticket out of here," Kane said. They climbed back up the stairs and tried the keys in the lock. The third one turned, and the door creaked open. Kane and Ethan emerged into the mill, only to find Richard Cole and a group of townsfolk waiting for them. "You shouldn't have come here, Detective," Richard said, his voice cold. "Now you'll have to pay the price." Kane raised his gun, but he was outnumbered. The townsfolk closed in, their eyes filled with malice. But before they could strike, a voice rang out. "Stop!" It was Margaret Whittaker. She stood in the doorway, a shotgun in her hands. Her eyes were filled with a fierce determination. "You're not going to hurt anyone else," she said, her voice steady. Richard laughed. "You think you can stop us, Margaret? You're just one woman." Margaret's finger tightened on the trigger. "I'm not alone." From behind her, a group of townsfolk emerged, people who had grown tired of living in fear, who were ready to stand up to the darkness that had plagued Black Hollow for too long. A tense standoff ensued, but in the end, Richard and his followers were forced to surrender. The authorities were called. The aftermath. Clara's body was never found, but the evidence against Richard Cole and his followers was overwhelming. They were arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including murder. The town of Black Hollow began to heal, but the scars would always remain. Kane stayed in Black Hollow for a few more weeks, helping to piece together the case. Before he left, he visited Clara's grave, a small, unmarked plot on the edge of town. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," he whispered. "But I promise, your story won't be forgotten." As he drove away from Black Hollow, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that the town's darkness hadn't been fully vanquished. Somewhere, deep in the woods, the shadows still lingered, waiting for their next victim. This story is a mix of mystery, suspense, and horror, with a touch of small-town intrigue. Let me know if you'd like to expand on any part of it.